Hello, Will. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, LJ. It's been a heavy last few days. I know we've had a conversation off camera about that as well. So both of us really wanted to take this opportunity to talk to our listeners and share our perspectives, but do a lot of listening as we're doing now as well. How are
Yeah,
you?
there's a lot of things to unpack, unfortunately. It's been a heavy week, heavy past few days, really, with the recent discoveries in Kamloops in British Columbia. You being in British Columbia, I can't even imagine how that's, affecting the community where you live in. We can certainly feel it here in Ontario. It's with heavy heart and great sadness that this is being processed at the moment, but I think it's important to talk about these things, and it's very important to process these feelings and these emotions, and most of all to basically just process it and talk to our indigenous friends, talk to our family, talk to our mentors and our clients about the importance and the impact of this finding.
Absolutely. I want to begin with a land recognition, and I think the more I do these, and especially in times like this, the more you think about the importance of honoring and establishing that legal contract that is a land acknowledgement. It is not just a pro forma statement. And I think too much pro forma has happened recently, and it's really time for action. So I do recognize that today I'm speaking from the traditional ancestral stolen territories on Turtle Island of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Kaikat nations, and my heart is with the Taikumlups to Shawekmuk nation. I know I got to work on my pronunciation a bit. I think it's incumbent on all of us to do a little better. But my heart is with them and with the 215 families that are grieving, but really all of the families of Indian residential schools that are impacted. This has brought up old wounds, but they're really fresh wounds and still wounds that are bleeding today. And I think it's important that we talk about it with the proximity of immigration. And LJ, yourself?
I am coming to you from the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and I am in Turtle Island. I am an immigrant to Turtle Island not too long ago. It truly does, strike. It's like a strike in the heart of, like a dagger. I'm sorry. It's a very it's something that's nothing. It's You're right. Well, a lot of times you ask yourself, and I certainly ask myself, like, these land acknowledgements, are they performative? Is it something that we just do out of routine? The recent discoveries basically put us in a position where we think about our what we do, these things that we think of as routine, or that may seem like routine. They basically, this new discovery is basically a reminder of how fresh these wounds are, and how much accounting as a society that we still need to do to process all of this, and what to do next, more importantly, whether as immigrants yourself, or as allies to the indigenous populations of Turtle Island. And I think that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about today too, right? Well, allyship. What are
Mhm.
your thoughts about this?
Well, I think first of all, it's not something that we can claim. We cannot just put that tag or label on ourselves. Changing a profile picture, even donating some money. I think for too long, that's been the way of us throwing something at the problem to maybe insulate our own guilt, maybe think we're doing something, but really there are two steps. Right now, we have to do a lot of listening and learning and go beyond just the surface level of reading a few articles, really digging and learning. And I know, and then, the word digging hurts right now because that's what needs to really, really be done from a scientific perspective as well, digging up the sites of the former Indian residential schools. But I think for too long, and even in our own education system, we were given just the little snippets, the positive, the dance, the celebrations, the masks, a few little pieces, and told that was the history we needed to know.
Right.
And I think it's from all this, this isn't something that was just uncovered. It's not that we just found the bodies. These bodies have been lying there for hundreds of years, and they lie in hundreds and thousands of more places across Canada, and we've just been silent to it. We've just I don't know if how do we start caring for brothers and sisters in a country that we claim to be always, number one to live in, the best, democratic, you know,
Inclusive.
inclusive, multicultural, mosaic, all of these, beautiful, wonderful words, and the realities that we see, or sometimes we choose not to see. I mean, someone said it best, and unmarked graves rarely go unmarked for no reason, right?
Yeah.
So I know I've sort of taken a loop, but I think the first thing for allies to do in this circumstance is to really stop centering themselves. Stop. I think for all of us, that's why this week we didn't have a regular episode. I don't know about you, but I've had trouble focusing on regular work this week because, sometimes as much as we make it meaningful, we're trying to change the world and helping our clients. We are helping clients settle stolen Indigenous lands.
That's right. And that's something that we don't necessarily talk about in immigration as a practice or even as immigrants ourselves. Today, the House of Commons in Ottawa actually passed in unanimous vote Bill C-8. And for those of you who don't know what Bill C-8 is about, it's an amendment to the Oath of Citizenship in Canada that actually entrenches Indigenous histories in the Oath of Citizenship to Canada. It's a positive step for sure, but there definitely needs to be more conversations about this. Coming from the perspective of an immigrant myself, I recall the citizenship guide. There's a lot of celebration about Indigenous cultures and traditions, but there's no accounting, no talk of the dark history of how Canada came to be. This is a part of our history as a country, and we need to accept this, and we need to reckon with it, and we need to face ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, how do we move forward as a nation, as a country, with this kind of historical baggage? I think, Will, you were knocking on the right door when you talked about listening. Essentially, this is the time to listen. They have been screaming and no one has been listening, unfortunately. So yeah, I take this opportunity. This week has been a moment of reflection, and I agree. It's also been the same for me. It's been hard to focus, even with the demands of work. Unfortunately, that is the case. That it's hard to focus. I mean, who could really, if you think about it? Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a little lost for words when it comes to that, and I suppose that in itself is, something that I still need to reckon with as an immigrant myself, working in the field of immigration, being directly, you know, it's basically where the rubber meets the road. Well, like you're right, we're basically encouraging people to move to the best country in the world. At least this is what the marketing is, and we're moving to stolen land.
Yeah, and more programs. I mean, I struggle with trying to bring this to a bigger context. But since we're talking about TRCs and since we're talking about, the larger context, we're moving in with all these different municipal programs, all these different things to bring more migrants to communities outside of big cities.
Right.
And a lot of those places are Indigenous reserves, are maybe small towns and cities that are very proximal to the heart of Indigenous communities, with little to no consultation with Indigenous communities. And yes, there are two TRCs, aptly 93 and 94, the last two. But all that really says is that we should give newcomers to Canada, a citizenship test that reflects more the inclusive history of the diverse peoples. And yes, it does mention residential schools, but it just says history. It doesn't say anything else. A history that, like we discussed, has been largely hidden and not written. And now the stories are coming out because we're starting to listen. But there has to be a do element there too. And I think that's where the government steps in, right? I'm not an expert on this particular area, but I've had members of the community reflect to me in, as a member of the legal community, how frustrating things such as the 60 scoop, the lawsuits, how difficult it has been to access justice, and how a lot of the money that was promised to the communities and promised to the victims is sitting in the pockets and coffers of law firms as their settlement win. Something like that just disgusts me. And it's hard to fathom, that we as a legal community have largely just been so silent on all of this, right? I think that it was the laws themselves that were utilized to create the division, create Indigenous, create the Indian Act, create residential schools. And it's incumbent on us now to utilize the law to try and address the harm and the legacy that we've created. So I don't know. I'm thinking about ways I can do in my own practice. And like you, I'm stuck right now. I've had to tell a few clients that sorry, it's just not the week I can see you. Unfortunately, it's just I have other things on my mind, and I just became a father too. So thinking about a kid being taken from you at a young age, I cannot imagine that, and to have them murdered.
I mean, the stories are harrowing. I will admit I did not know much about this until just a few years ago, and what I did find out when doing the proper integration into like the research into the history of this, it really is disturbing in my mind. And it's not something that is on the front cover of those citizenship guides, right? Like the citizenship test guides, for sure. And the problem with that, and I think you touched on a really important thing, well, when you mention history, is that when people say history, people think that, oh, it's far in the past. What are we going to do about it? But what's actually true here is that this is history unfolding. History doesn't necessarily have to be in the past. It is something that is constantly written. And how we act and deal with this historical baggage is essentially what our collective history will be. We still have the power to change it. We still have the power to direct it. I don't have the answers. Just like you, I'm lost for words. I'm, a little bit scatterbrained, to be honest, just because of the emotional turmoil that this has basically brought upon like a lot of people who have thought about this event. There really is this really is a continuous process. I think this is something that needs to be continuously hammered, because it's not in the past. It's something that is still being written.
Well said. And I just maybe right now is not the exact time for the conversations to start. Maybe right now it's for healing and for us settlers, like you said, listening, seeing little ways we can support, work towards. Again, I think allyship is an ideal, and it's not one that you can label yourself and not anyone can obtain, but how to be better communicators and how to start and engage in conversations. I know it's something that we're starting to do, to think about, much too late. But immigration in general, this process,
Mhm.
the the very work we do is colonial work. And the way we're going, the path we're going with a lot of these programs, and I mean just things starting from from the lack of Indigenous judges on our highest courts, and now there's another opening on the Supreme Court, to the federal court, all the way to the fact that Indigenous law students and colleagues of ours often have the very difficult time finding career paths in law, working in this area, gaining opportunity here. Those are some tangible gaps that we can fill and we can do something about. And as a bar, as a legal community, I think our silence has been way too deafening on Indigenous issues. I'll leave my comments at that.
It's been a difficult last few days, and I can't even imagine how it has impacted the various communities whose wounds have been freshly opened again. I'm going to leave my comments to that. I, for one, just like you will be continuing to listen to our friends.
But thanks for discussing this with me, LJ. And I know this week nothing seemed appropriate for us to do than to unpack with each other, but with our families as well and our communities. So I hope we can do, I can't even use the word better or more, but just
I think we can leave it at that,
Okay,
really.
perfect.
We just need to continue listening
Yeah,
at this point.
thanks. Thanks, LJ.
Thank you, everyone.